Hey Burns, how's it?
Not bad, Dick. How about yourself? You have a good week?
Well, I had a good week, except I screwed up. You might notice I'm wearing my dark glasses because I went to get new glasses, figuring I do it every year. Well, it turns out the last time I did it was 6 years ago. The problem being is I couldn't find backup glasses. So if I want to see anything, I have to run around looking like the little blind kid.
Well, I think they look great on you, except you should have a black blazer, a black shirt, and maybe a white tie, so you look kind of mafiosa.
Well, I could probably do that, but I can't read things. And they told me it'd be like 3 weeks because everything has to get ordered from the mainland. So I don't really know.
Yeah,
But it has to be fast because I can't see squat.
yeah. Well,
Hey,
I hear you. I can't see with glasses or without. So we're a couple of blind men today.
yeah. Hey, I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's coming true, and that's the latest mutation of COVID. Uh, And the issue becomes Pfizer's working on it, a Omicron only thing. But the fact is, it'll just keep on mutating. We can't keep up with it. And I'm not sure where that's leading. I mean, we've been in this game for 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years. I mean, it's ridiculous. I can't afford to throw out 2 years of my life waiting for this to get under control. But it still is like that.
I heard an epidemiologist today on a talk show, and I like the way he put it. He said it's high time the medical muckety mucks, Fauci and his legions, develop some quote unquote humility based on new research that's coming out, which contradicts most of what they've been telling us for 2 years. And that, and I know you and I have some differences on this, but basically this guy was arguing that those in high places still want to control us as Americans, abridge our freedoms, and not let us make our own decisions. As an example, decisions regarding wearing masks or decisions about getting a booster. It's I hearken to the current protests going on in Canada, where Trudeau has required that Canadian truckers going into the U.S., cross-border truckers, both going into the U.S. as well as either Canadian truckers returning to Canada or U.S. truckers coming into Canada, have to show proof of vaccination or they can't cross. So there are all kinds of protests going on. And having come from that industry, I sure empathize with the truckers. Truckers, other than when they're in terminals or they may be at a cross-dock operation, generally lead a solitary existence in the cab of a tractor. So, they make an art form out of social distancing. They damn sure don't need to wear a mask. And this is something I've touched on the last couple of weeks, and you've kind of fired back at me, but particularly with this very contagious wave of Omicron, studies have pretty well proven that there's not a great deal of efficacy in either the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccines protecting you from contracting it, or if you contract it, from even passing it on. And as I said last week, the good news is that it does provide protection against hospitalization, and if you're hospitalized, potentially death. And those are certainly good reasons to think about doing it. But the notion that you're supposed to be ostracized by the government if you don't comply with 2 shots plus a booster, and now they're talking about a 4th booster, which they've already done in Israel, by the way, seems a bit much given the nature of Omicron. And like you say, there's going to be another mutation, another variant coming down the pike, and it remains to be seen what these quote unquote vaccines can do. It's interesting, Moderna common stock has fallen through the basement because investors, more so than public health officials, have noted that while it provides some protection, it's not nearly as high as was advertised, either by Moderna itself or the CDC. So there's a lot going on, and the pandemic is wearing people out. And I would just argue that adults ought to be able to make those decisions. Parents ought to make those decisions for their children. And oh, by the way, and then I'll turn it back to you, Fauci just this week is now targeting 6-month-olds to 5-year-olds. And I already commented on that in podcast 28, so I won't be redundant.
Yeah, but I feel that if people had gotten on the train early on and gotten vaccinated, we wouldn't be in the problem we're in now. But for the reasons that many people didn't get vaccinated, it allowed the spread of COVID-19 and then ultimately the variants, Omicron and Omicron variants. The problem still becomes is that viruses mutate, and we can never keep up with it by vaccines. I mean, that's just the way it is. I was asking you earlier, I am supposedly high risk, immune deficiency, you name it, and all the other happy things that go along with it. But most of the elderly people, no, that's the wrong term. I hate to use that term. Most of the older people seem to be okay. And I think it's a function of what we got from drinking out of garden hoses, slobbing our cuts with mercurochrome and whatever on one side. But on the other side is we build up these immunities. Now, in my case, I honestly think that chemo, which is basically killing off viruses and everything, probably works better than a lot of other stuff, except that the side effects really suck. So, I think a lot of research needs to be done, and I don't think it's been done. And I honestly think the reason it hasn't been done is that people are making a lot of money out of the prophylaxis and the other stuff. If we got rid of cancer, then where are these people going to get money from?
Yeah, same with diabetes.
Yeah. The guy that invented insulin sold it as an open patent for $1. And for many years, it was what, $20 a month? I understand now that insulin's like $600 a month.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Biden, for one, keeps promising that he's going to bring that cost down. I haven't seen that yet. By the way, and I think I mentioned this last week, so I am going to be redundant. My understanding is that Israel is the, if this is the correct way to put it, the most highly vaccinated country in the world right now in terms of COVID.
Supposedly, yeah.
Yeah, and well, okay. And they've just had and I'm talking about recent weeks, a huge outbreak in Omicron. So it may be an example of one, but it suggests that the general statement I've heard is, there's some credence to it that while Omicron, or excuse me, while the vaccinations provided some good protection with the original COVID virus and subsequently the Delta virus, the Omicron, not nearly enough. But to your point, we got off to a slow start other than seniors. Seniors seem to have gotten the minute the drug was available, boom, we went out and got the drug. So your point could be well taken.
Okay, that brings me to the next concern I've got. And that's Biden's line in the sand in Ukraine.
He's caused the president of the Ukraine, I believe that's his title, president, a lot of consternation because the president of the Ukraine is trying to keep his, Tito just walked in, if you noticed. He may be hopping up here any second now. He's trying to keep his people calm. He doesn't want, people to get so panicked that the economy crashes. And from his point of view, Biden keeps stirring the pot. Of course, the most precipitous thing being the press conference. Most all Americans are talking about. Sorry about my cat. Namely, where Biden said that his response, or the U.S. response, would be different if it's a minor incursion as opposed to a major invasion. But Biden called the president of the Ukraine this week, and I've seen some transcriptions and some photos of the facial expression of the president of the Ukraine. I guess he had some real issues with Biden and told him so, and basically told Biden, I know more about my own country than you do, so quit trying to be the expert and suggesting that it's all but a certainty that Russia is going to invade my country. So, having said that, though, I read different reports, and some suggest it's not going to happen, and others, as an example, just in recent days, despite the 100,000 troops amassed at the border, Russian troops, apparently up until 2 days ago, they didn't have medical facilities established, the logistics of bringing in, and you would know better than I, having been in the Army, but the MASH type units, the medical facilities, ambulances, a logistic supply to deal with wounds in war. But that's happening now as we speak. Now, maybe that's just an additional bluff from Putin, but it does suggest that some caution has to be exercised for sure. The other quick comment I would make, and then I'll give it back to you, is it's pretty interesting, and you and I have differed on this, and that's okay. But I hearken back to Americans being stuck in Afghanistan when the military was precipitously withdrawn before American citizens were able to get out, and even Afghan people that worked with our military during the 20-year war. And, most everybody, I think, would agree, even leftist journalists, that the Afghan withdrawal was bungled. And now today I heard that the State Department has advised American citizens to get out of the Ukraine as soon as possible, but they're not going to provide anything other than suggestions with regard to where they could go. In other words, we're not doing an airlift of American citizens out of the Ukraine. If you want to get out of the Ukraine, you book your own ticket on a commercial airline, or your own ticket on a bus, or however, a train. So there are some signs that are at least troubling in terms of the potential advent of war. Back to you, Colonel Griggs.
Well, your point's well taken. After the withdrawal, well, I go back to Vietnam. After the withdrawal from Saigon and all these other places, you kind of wonder. See, I'm basically a logistician, and I find it really hard to believe that something could become so screwed up that you got people wandering the streets, wondering if they should get on a plane or whatever else, or how to. But I still know a lot of people who did not want to leave. They had wives, they had kids, they had everything else. I mean, going back to Vietnam and happening in Afghanistan. And that needs to be addressed. But on the other hand, if somebody says, I want to get out, we ought to provide that, and it should be possible. So, I'm not sure what.
I'm good with what you just said.
The what?
I'm very good with what you just said. That's you're saying prudence dictates you get out, but you're also saying if the situation warrants and we need to provide assistance from a transportation point of view, the government ought to do that for American citizens. So I'm just saying I'm good with that.
Okay, great.
We agree.
That's part of the issue, but what really bothers me, and it's been on PBS, which I don't really watch that often, except for our Srinivasan or NBC, what's his name? God, what is his name? The guy on NBC, the guy that was broadcaster of the year. I'm drawing a blank.
I don't know. I don't watch the networks.
Okay, but what really bothers me is the people in Afghanistan are starving. I mean, it's pathetic. It's incredible. I mean, it's in the middle of winter over there, and winters over there suck. So something needs to be done. Whether it will be, I don't know. It's part of the political thing. I don't like you. And because of that, I'm going to cut off all aid. Well, that doesn't hurt the government. It hurts the people. And that's the type of thing that needs to be looked at and addressed realistically. And I don't think it is.
I recall
Lester Holt.
Lester
That's
Holt.
the one on NBC. Lester Holt. I love him.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember if I said this last week, and if I did, forgive me. But Barbara Tuchman, the well-regarded historian who wrote, I believe it was called Guns of August, but it was about the antecedents that precipitated, maybe a better word would be miscalculations that led to World War I. But Kennedy read that book and quoted it during Security Council meetings where he had his key staff, including his brother, who was the Attorney General, when some in his administration during the Cuban Missile Crisis were basically saying, let's wipe Cuba off the map. And Kennedy chose what he felt in terms of the naval blockade was a much more moderate approach. Dick, you've often said that if we don't read and understand history, we're bound to repeat it. And one of the things that concerns me,
said that, by the way?
somebody far more famous than you or I.
I just read something a day or two ago, and apparently that quote came from, most recently, Winston Churchill.
Oh, I'll be darned. Now that's interesting.
Yeah, now I doubt he was the first one. Like, ask not what you can do for your country, etc. That goes way back to Greek and Roman times.
And Kennedy's speechwriters plagiarized that a bit, huh?
That's exactly what they did.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm a Churchill fan, and God, if somebody would have asked me, I'd say I'm pretty well read on Churchill, but I didn't know he's the one who made that quote.
Well, I didn't know either.
But it makes sense. It's
yeah, but it probably went back again to the Greeks and Romans because they were pretty good at saying things. But I had to interrupt you because I knew you were a Churchill fan. And when I stumbled on that, maybe it was the History Channel or something, it really kind of went, oh my God.
Yeah.
There he is.
By the way, a little piece of trivia. Churchill, great author that he was, he wrote more words than Shakespeare. And I was astounded at that fact.
Well, the guy was something else.
And I don't think Shakespeare was plugging away through bottles of Cavassier as he wrote his dramas, like Churchill was when he wrote his histories.
Well, I was going to say that Cavassier and a cigar.
Yeah, what I've heard is he getting off on a tangent.
Out, and he came back. I mean, incredible.
Yeah, Churchill actually was an early riser, much like Trump. But Trump doesn't drink alcohol. But Churchill started with scotch before he even got out of bed.
Yeah, but then what is Trump on?
Diet Coke.
Oh, okay.
The problem is he marries up the Diet Coke with Big Macs. So whatever he gains with the Diet Coke, he loses with the Big Macs. But back to Churchill quickly. it was scotch from 4 to maybe 6:37 when he finally got out of bed. Now, when he was in bed drinking the scotch, he was reading newspapers and dictating correspondence to his secretary. But then through the day, he drank champagne, and very good champagne, I'm told. And then in the evening, wine with dinner, and then after dinner, brandy, Cavassier, that type of thing. But the man was, at least based on what I've read, a functional alcoholic. But he had an amazing constitution. And now having gone through all that, I've got to get back to where see if I can regain my thought. But what I'm trying to suggest is, well, let me put it bluntly. I've heard of presidents who are tremendous readers. Kennedy was. I've never heard that Biden keeps books on his nightstand. I think he keeps ice cream, down in the White House kitchen and at his home in Delaware. And when he makes the occasional trip out to Camp David, but I've never heard he's a reader. And his grades in college and law school suggest as much. So while I don't know for sure, I'm only speculating, it does concern me that along with the questions about his cognitive skills these days at his age, that he's not a well-read man and is necessarily getting good advice tempered by his own knowledge in terms of the Ukraine. I don't think America has great vested interests in the Ukraine, but I do think the ramifications of Putin deciding he's just going to go into any country he feels like going into is something, at the very least, NATO, of which the U.S. is a major player, has to be very cognizant of.
Yeah, the problem with that, though, is that Germany, for example, particularly, depends on Russian gas, and that's gone on for ever since Chernobyl went up. That's part of the problem. So to get the Germans, for example, I heard on the news last night that Germans are not going to send military aid to Ukraine, but they're sending helmets. I'm going, well, that's just peachy kino. And Europe has got that problem. Part of the issue becomes, to my mind, is it's a European issue. And why the hell we get involved and muck everything up really kind of irritates me. If the Europeans want to deal with this and have no problem with a small incursion, whatever that is, in the Ukraine, then we ought to say, bless you, just drive on. But Europe has never been able to do that. They talk big with the European Union and all the rest of the stuff. They don't accomplish squat. And on the other hand, we go in without getting ourselves in with the European allies, normally pissing them off more than anything else. And we just screw it up even more. Now, having said that, it was more of a ventilation, but having said that, with Putin, I think it's like chess. I don't think he plans on invading because it's not worth the risk. If you do cost-benefit analysis, and I assume that Putin knows how to do that. If he doesn't, shame on him. But this can't go on the way it's going on, the bullying, the threatening, and all the rest of the stuff. And we ought to say, that's enough, that's it, stop. But we don't seem able to do that. And then, of course, we got your buddy Joe, who just stumbles through it all.
Well, and that's the big concern. It's that even if Biden were to say the right things, he's perceived, and I would argue correctly with a capital C, to be among the weakest presidents we've ever had in the White House in our history. I mean, he equivocates, vacillates, and changes his mind within the same paragraph. And a guy like Putin, who I know you know this, is former KGB. He sees that, as do the Red Chinese vis-a-vis Taiwan and Iran in terms of their determination to develop a nuclear capacity. And Trump's buddy up in North Korea, I say that tongue in cheek because Trump always said that they had a great relationship. But those things are watched. I mean, that's the art of diplomacy, is what is said, how it's said, and the intonation of leaders, statesmen. Biden is not a statesman.
Well, no, but the other thing that's interesting, and people don't realize it, is when Trump was president, the Russian missiles, I'm sorry, not Russian, the North Korean missiles and everything stopped. Now
they did.
Back, they're blowing on a weekly basis.
Absolutely. And by the way, and you said it, you made a brief comment. I think what you were saying here, and I just recently read about this, but you mentioned the Germans counting on natural gas from Russia, and that they have since Chernobyl. I didn't know until I read what I thought to be a very, very good, well done article, is that their main sources of energy were coal-fueled energy and nuclear energy. And then the Germans, both because of what happened at Chernobyl, but also the climate change movement, and Merkel being, a leftist through and through, they started shutting down their nuclear generators, their nuclear power plants. So it's something that the Germans have really done tactically to themselves by and this sounds like a pun, it's not meant to be, but by overreacting about their reactors. They shut so many down, they now needed natural gas to augment coal-powered energy plants. And they negotiated this deal, this pipeline with Russia, of which Trump, protested vehemently. But now they're caught between a rock and a hard place because, we are in the winter, and Germany needs that natural gas from Russia. And that's a chess piece that Putin has.
Well, yeah, and the Germans set it up. I mean, they're responsible for whatever. My experience is traveling the countryside. The only country that still has a lot of nuclear is France, and they're getting rid of it. So, if that happens and it keeps on getting stalled, it's just going to prolong the issue. But the basic bottom line is the Germans set up the new pipeline, paid for it, everything else. So if they want to complain about it, they've only got themselves to spank on the butt.
Yeah. As a general statement, and I'm sure you could cite exceptions, but I think it's fair to say that among the NATO nations, the only one that typically steps up is Britain. I mean, fact is they've been a good and consistent ally with the U.S. Germany, I don't think can be counted on, and the French fashion themselves the greatest diplomats that ever held court in the history of the world. But Britain can typically be counted on. I think I'm correct that Britain has sent some munitions, armament to the Ukraine. But again, I'm with you. I don't think we have a vital national interest in the Ukraine. I sure don't think the country has the stomach for another war, having just lost the war in Afghanistan after 20 years. But having said all that, it worries we're just not going about it very well in terms of trying to change Putin's mind if he's determined to go in there. And the other thing that's disappointing, and one of the reasons I think why the House of Representatives and the Senate are held in such low regard by the American people, is this Ukraine thing's been going on for a little while now, but it's particularly heated up since that press conference. Can you think of any prominent Congress man or woman who's taken the lead and spoken up in representing the people in terms of trying to head off a possible invasion?
No, and I think part of the problem goes back to what a lot of people have said for literally decades, and that is the people in Congress have not had military service. They don't have a clue what the hell is going on. And so you're not going to get a feedback. Right now, the only thing people care about, and we're running out of time, is the fact that are we going to go with a black female Supreme Court justice? But I think we ought to save that for next week, because things should get kind of exciting then.
Are you telling me we're almost out of time?
We're over by 10 minutes.
Oh, for God's sake. Time flies when you're having fun. A good quick bit of trivia. May I?
Of course.
You make a good point about the vast majority of people in the Congress not having military experience. But one prominent historical figure that didn't have any military experience either was Abraham Lincoln. But in conducting the Civil War, unlike so many presidents, modern day presidents, Lincoln not only lived in what was called the War Room and the telegraph office in Washington, D.C., but he also visited battlefields in harm's way. And the other thing is he literally emptied the Library of Congress on military books on strategy and tactics. In other words, just as he was a self-educated man, including reading for the law, he became, quite brilliant in terms of his basic knowledge of military tactics. So he was a phenomenal man in so many ways, and I just wanted to make mention of that.
Your point is well taken. And with that, I guess I should say, see you next week, Burns.
Okay, hope everybody enjoyed our podcast and will subscribe to it. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube.
Okey doke.
Okay, you take care, Dick.
Thanks. Same to you.